They say women want love, but that's not entirely true. Not anymore. Not after everything they've seen, lost, and survived. When a woman has walked through decades of heartbreak, betrayal, or quiet neglect, something inside her changes. She stops believing in fairy tales. She stops chasing the kind of affection that comes wrapped in flowers and promises. Instead, she begins to seek out something darker, something quieter, something real. And that's why, so often, you'll see her chasing the man who no longer believes in love. He's not charming anymore. He doesn't play games. His words are measured, his eyes tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from seeing too much. He doesn't try to impress her, and that's exactly what draws her in. Because when a woman reaches a certain age, she doesn't want the boy who still believes love will save him. She wants the man who already knows it won't. The irony is cruel, but it's human. Older women often find themselves drawn to men who've stopped trying. Men who once gave everything and were left with nothing but silence. Men who have turned love into a private graveyard, a place they visit but never stay in. And she's not chasing him because she thinks she can fix him. No. She's chasing him because she understands him. Because she, too, has learned that love isn't the endless bloom everyone talks about. It's a slow decay that reveals who you are when everything beautiful begins to rot. You see, people assume attraction is about compatibility, about finding someone who complements your happiness. But that's not the full truth. Attraction is trauma recognizing itself. It's memory meeting mirror. And when an older woman meets a man who's given up on love, she doesn't see his detachment as coldness, she sees it as honesty. He doesn't lie to her with hope. He doesn't tell her he'll make her happy. He simply exists, raw, unpolished, unromantic. And for a woman who's tired of pretending, that's intoxicating. Because deep down, she doesn't want to be adored anymore. She wants to be understood. She wants someone who sees her scars not as damage, but as evidence. And only a man who no longer believes in love can look at her that way, without idealism, without expectation, without fear. It's the forbidden truth of human attraction. The closer we come to emotional death, the more we crave someone who understands the language of ghosts. Older women chase men who no longer believe in love because those men carry the silence they've been craving. They are steady, unreactive, almost sacred in their detachment. And in that stillness, she finds peace, or at least, a place where her own chaos feels less alone. He's the man who's not trying to win her heart. He's not even sure he wants it. And yet, she follows him, not because she wants his love, but because she wants his calm. It's a strange kind of magnetism. He represents the end of illusion, and after a lifetime of emotional noise, she's ready for that. When a man stops believing in love, he stops performing. He no longer needs to prove he's worthy, desirable, or strong. He's already been broken, and through that, he's become free. Free from the endless need for validation. And to a woman who's been defined by giving, that kind of freedom looks divine. She doesn't want to fix him, though sometimes she'll convince herself she can. She wants to stand next to him, to feel the weight of a man who's not pretending anymore. Because that's what she's wanted all along, someone who's real, even if he's ruined. And here's the cruel paradox. The more she chases him, the further he retreats. Not out of cruelty but out of protection. He's seen what love can do. He's felt how it empties you, how it strips you down to something less than human. And he's not willing to drown again, no matter how beautiful the storm looks this time. But she can't help it. She's drawn to the storm's survivor. Because he represents what she secretly wants to become, someone untouched by the chaos of desire. Someone who's beyond need. That's the forbidden truth behind this strange pursuit. Older women chase men who no longer believe in love because, deep down, they're tired of believing too. They just haven't admitted it yet. And in him, in his silence, his restraint, his distance, she sees the reflection of the woman she's becoming. Love, at that stage, isn't about romance anymore. It's about recognition. The kind of recognition that whispers, "I see you. I've survived too." And that's where the story begins. There's a woman named Claire. 52 years old. Divorced for 7. She laughs at the idea of love now, but still catches herself lingering in grocery store aisles, imagining someone reaching for the same brand of coffee, the same quiet routine. She met him at a friend's dinner, a man named Daniel. Widowed. 55. The kind of man who listens more than he speaks. His presence filled the room without demanding it. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. His hands were rough, his voice low, and when someone mentioned relationships, he smiled, that tired kind of smile that says, "I've already buried enough dreams." Claire didn't know why, but she felt calm around him. Not excited, calm. That's how it begins for women like her. After years of emotional turbulence, calm feels like chemistry. They started talking, but there was no flirting, no games. He asked about her work, her son, her silence. When she asked if he ever thought about dating again, he said, "I've had enough of trying to build something that always ends up falling apart. I'd rather just live." That answer haunted her, because it sounded like freedom. She told herself she wasn't interested, that she just admired his honesty. But honesty, when it comes from a man who no longer wants anything from you, is dangerously magnetic. She began to text him. Little things at first. Then longer messages. He always replied, kind, thoughtful, but distant. Never leading her on. Never promising anything. And yet, every message from him felt like oxygen. Not because he gave her affection, but because he didn't demand hers. Older women like Claire aren't drawn to men like Daniel because they want to be adored. They're drawn to them because they feel safe in the absence of demand. For decades, they've been pouring, giving, proving. And now, here's a man who asks for nothing. Who doesn't chase, doesn't flatter, doesn't need. And that kind of emptiness feels like relief. There's another story, a woman named Julia. She was married for 22 years to a man who loved her in all the wrong ways, through control, dependency, and silence. When she finally left, she swore she'd never fall for anyone again. But then she met someone different, a man who'd already detached from love itself. He was blunt, distant. When she asked him what he wanted in life, he said, "I just want peace. Nothing else matters anymore." And she thought, that's what I want too. But peace, when it comes from emotional numbness, is deceptive. Because it feels like safety at first, until you realize it's also isolation dressed as wisdom. Still, she stayed. Not because he gave her attention, but because he gave her space. He wasn't asking for commitment, wasn't asking for her to prove anything. And after decades of trying to be enough for someone else, that was intoxicating. Older women often chase these men not out of love, but out of exhaustion. Because the man who no longer believes in love doesn't threaten them with expectation. He becomes the refuge from everything love once demanded. And sometimes, they convince themselves they can awaken him again. They believe that if they love gently enough, patiently enough, he might start to believe again. But that belief is a ghost from their younger years, a leftover instinct to heal what's broken, instead of accepting what's gone. It's a quiet tragedy that plays out behind so many eyes. A woman in her 50s falling for a man who's emotionally retired. A woman who still believes love can be rebuilt, chasing a man who knows the ruins are all that's left. There was one night when Claire sat across from Daniel at a cafe. Rain outside. Half-empty cups of coffee. She told him she missed the days when she still believed in forever. He looked at her and said, "Forever is something you believe in until life shows you how long it actually is." It broke her. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. And in that truth, she saw herself reflected. She realized she wasn't chasing his love. She was chasing understanding. Someone who had walked through the same kind of fire and survived with a heartbeat, even if it beats slower now. That's what connects them. The shared fatigue. The quiet acceptance that love, as they once knew it, doesn't come back. But something else can, something quieter. Not love in the romantic sense, but a kind of emotional companionship born from mutual disillusionment. They sit together not to build, but to rest. Not to fall, but to lean. You see, the chase isn't always about desire. Sometimes it's about finding someone who doesn't force you to pretend anymore. When she chases the man who no longer believes in love, she's really chasing a version of herself that's done with the illusions, the soft lies, the promises, the performative affection. He is her mirror, stripped of all sentimentality, worn by time, honest to the point of cruelty. And that's precisely why she can't walk away. Because for the first time in her life, she's not being sold a dream. She's being shown the truth, raw, unfiltered, unromantic. And after years of living on emotional fiction, truth is the most seductive thing of all. That's why older women chase men who've stopped believing in love. Because deep down, they never stopped believing in connection. They just stopped believing it has to look like love to mean something. And in that paradox, both of them, the woman who's tired of giving and the man who's tired of trying, find a strange, fleeting peace in each other's brokenness. There comes a moment, quiet but sharp, when she realizes what she's chasing isn't love. It's recognition. It's that rare feeling of being seen by someone who doesn't demand a version of her that no longer exists. Because when you've spent years holding up the fragile architecture of love, the pretending, the fixing, the waiting, the soul begins to crave stillness. And that's what he gives her. Stillness. But stillness has a cost. At first, she confuses his distance for depth. She tells herself he's just guarded, that his silence means something sacred. But silence is a dangerous thing. It becomes whatever you project onto it. And so she fills his silence with meaning, until it becomes an echo of her own need. She begins to mistake the absence of rejection for intimacy, the absence of attention for peace, the absence of chaos for love. She doesn't see that he's not withholding affection to test her, he's simply empty. Love no longer lives inside him, only memory does. And she keeps knocking on that memory, hoping it will answer. Older women don't fall in love with men like him because they're foolish. They fall because they understand the weight he carries. They see in him the exhaustion they've never been allowed to admit in themselves. They've spent their lives being strong, being nurturing, being forgiving. And now, here's a man who refuses to play those roles anymore. He's the one person in her life who doesn't expect her to be soft. He doesn't need her light. He's already made peace with the dark. And there's a freedom in that. To not have to perform tenderness. To not have to prove your worth through warmth. Because when a woman grows older, her love becomes quieter. Less about fireworks, more about gravity. And gravity always finds itself drawn to what's heavy. So she stays. Even when she knows he's not giving her love. Even when every conversation feels like walking through fog. Because something inside her believes that his refusal to feel is more real than the rehearsed affection she's known before. But love built on shared numbness isn't love. It's a truce between two broken souls. And that truce feels holy, until it starts to hurt. Because eventually, she'll want something small. Not grand, just small. A gesture, a word, a sign that she's more than company. She'll crave one act of vulnerability, one moment where he lets her in. But he won't. He's not cruel, he's simply done. And she'll feel that, not as rejection, but as loss. The loss of the illusion that her understanding could ever thaw him. She'll realize she's fallen in love with a man who's mastered the art of emotional absence. And she'll wonder why she ever mistook that for strength. But it's too late by then. Because by the time you love a man who doesn't believe in love, you've already started to lose your own faith in it too. The relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting her own fatigue, her own surrender. She begins to match his silence. She stops asking questions. She learns to talk around her longing instead of through it. And that's how she disappears, slowly, beautifully, quietly, in the name of understanding. She doesn't cry. She doesn't fight. She just fades into the same kind of emotional numbness that once made him look so peaceful. But peace that comes from giving up is not peace. It's resignation. And one night, maybe after dinner, maybe in the middle of a slow conversation, she'll look at him and feel it. The emptiness. The stillness that once calmed her now feels suffocating. She'll miss the chaos. She'll miss the ache of wanting someone who wanted her back. She'll miss believing that love, even if it hurt, meant something. And that's when she'll understand the truth she's been avoiding. She wasn't chasing him to find love. She was chasing him to escape it. Because love, for her, had become synonymous with failure, with pain, with disappointment. And being with him meant she could finally stop expecting it to work. He gave her an excuse to surrender without shame. He made her defeat look like enlightenment. That's the brilliance of men who no longer believe in love. They carry their detachment like wisdom. And women mistake it for safety. But there's a difference between peace and emptiness. Peace fills you quietly. Emptiness just doesn't hurt anymore. And the older she gets, the harder it becomes to tell the difference. Still she stays, not because she's blind, but because she's tired. Tired of beginnings. Tired of promises. Tired of believing that love can always be reborn. So she finds comfort in a man who's already buried it. Because in his graveyard of emotion, she doesn't have to keep pretending hers are still alive. And that's what no one tells you about love in its later years. Sometimes the most powerful connection isn't about feeling more, it's about feeling less. Less pain. Less pressure. Less need. It's a love that looks calm from the outside, but it's really two people resting on the ruins of what they used to believe in. And maybe that's what draws them together. Not passion, not hope, but surrender. The kind of surrender that says, if you're done trying to, maybe we can finally stop pretending. That's not romance. That's quiet resignation disguised as understanding. And yet, it feels like love, because at least it's honest. There's a silence that exists between two people who've both stopped believing in love. It's not the silence of avoidance or tension, it's the silence of understanding. The kind that says, we both know how this story ends, and we're not here to rewrite it. And yet, there's something almost sacred in that. Because not every connection is meant to ignite. Some exist to remind us of what once burned, and what still smolders quietly beneath the ashes. When an older woman chases a man who no longer believes in love, she isn't chasing romance. She's chasing a reflection of her own survival. He's what she becomes when she finally stops trying to fix the world through affection. He represents peace, but also the end of illusion. He is the living reminder that love is not immortal, that hearts do not heal by willpower, that some stories end without resolution. And yet, when they sit together, over coffee, in the quiet glow of a fading afternoon, something unspoken happens. There's no intensity, no declarations. Just presence. Two people who no longer believe in love, sitting in the warmth of something that looks dangerously close to it. Because that's the final paradox. When you stop chasing love, you begin to see it everywhere. Not as a promise, not as salvation, but as a small, unassuming kindness that exists even in disillusionment. The man who no longer believes in love, he's not heartless. He's awake. He's seen what happens when idealism meets reality. He's watched passion turn into duty, vows turn into weapons, affection turn into control. He's seen love stripped of its poetry, and somehow, he's still here. Still breathing. Still capable of looking someone in the eyes without pretending to feel more than he does. And maybe that's its own kind of love. The kind that doesn't promise, doesn't demand, doesn't dream. Just is. The older woman, in chasing him, begins to understand something about herself. That what she called love in her younger years was often just fear wearing perfume. Fear of loneliness, fear of rejection, fear of being unseen. But now, standing before a man who gives her nothing to hold on to, she starts to see the difference between love and attachment. Love is not possession. Love is not validation. Love is not being needed. Love, when it's stripped bare, is simply recognition. Recognition that two people can meet in the same silence, understand the same pain, and not demand each other to fill it. That's the wisdom people mistake for coldness. That's the stillness they confuse for indifference. Because the truth is, he's not incapable of love. He's incapable of illusion. He refuses to dress emotion in promises it cannot keep. He refuses to turn connection into debt. And she, for the first time, finds herself drawn to that kind of brutal honesty. Because it's what she's been craving all along. Not affection, not adoration, truth. In a world where everyone performs sincerity, his apathy feels like authenticity. And though she'll never admit it, that's what makes him irresistible. There's something deeply human about wanting what can't be given. We chase the unavailable not because we enjoy the pain, but because it mirrors our own. And maybe that's why she keeps reaching for him, because he's the only man who doesn't pretend he can save her. He looks at her and sees her for what she is, a survivor of her own tenderness. Someone who's learned that caring deeply doesn't always end beautifully. Someone who's still here, despite the wreckage. And for a brief, fleeting moment, that's enough. Because maybe love doesn't have to heal. Maybe love doesn't have to grow. Maybe love, at this stage of life, is simply recognition without need. He won't change for her. She won't fix him. But together, they'll sit in the quiet acceptance that everything ends, and that it's still okay to feel something, even if it's not forever. That's the maturity most people never reach. It's the acceptance that love doesn't need to be hopeful to be real. It doesn't need to save you to matter. It just needs to show you a part of yourself that you'd forgotten. The part that still feels, even after giving up. And maybe that's the final truth about older women chasing men who no longer believe in love. They're not chasing romance. They're chasing honesty. The kind that doesn't dress itself up in fantasy. The kind that doesn't promise eternity, but offers presence. In a world obsessed with beginnings, they've learned to find beauty in what remains after the ending. And maybe that's love too. Not the kind that builds, but the kind that stays still. Because when two people who've stopped believing in love find each other, something quiet happens between them. A small, wordless truce between hearts that no longer fight the truth of what they've become. It's not romantic. It's not poetic. But it's real. And maybe, after everything, real is the only thing left worth chasing.